The wind had that lonely kind of cry that only the desert knows. It swept through the canyons like a ghost's whisper, carrying the scent of dust, sage, and memories that refuse to die. In that fading light of an Arizona sunset, a tall, silent cowboy rode slow across the wastelands. His name was Colt Dawson, a man known in every town from Santa Fe to Tucson, not for his fame, but for the way he carried his silence like a shadow. Folks said Colt had seen too much, too many graves, too many goodbyes, and that his heart had long been buried beneath the same dust his boots kicked up. He was heading nowhere in particular that evening, just following the sun the way a lost man follows something he can never reach. His horse, a brown stallion named Whiskey, trotted steady through the dry creek bed when Colt suddenly pulled the reins. There, between the thorny mesquite bushes, came a faint, trembling cry. It wasn't the wind, it was human, and it sounded like pain. Colt dismounted slowly, his boots crunching over gravel. "Easy now," he whispered, his hand hovering near his revolver out of habit. Then, as he brushed aside the branches, his heart gave a jolt he hadn't felt in years. There, lying in the dirt, was a small Apache girl, maybe 7 or 8, barefoot and trembling, her dark hair tangled with blood and dust. Her big brown eyes looked up at him, full of fear and confusion. Colt dropped to his knees. Hey now, you're safe," he said softly. But she didn't understand English. She flinched when he reached out, clutching a small beaded necklace so tight her knuckles turned white. Colt noticed the design, traditional Apache work, handmade with care. Whoever she belonged to, she meant the world to them. "Where's your folks?" he asked, scanning the horizon. Nothing but emptiness. Not a soul, not a sound except the whisper of wind. He took a slow breath and knew what he had to do. "All right, little one," he murmured, wrapping his coat around her tiny shoulders. "You're coming with me." He lifted her gently onto Whiskey's back, climbed up, and rode toward the distant light of a small frontier town called Red Hollow, a place that had seen as many gunfights as prayers. When he reached the outskirts, the townsfolk watched him curiously. An Apache child with a white cowboy was enough to stir whispers like wildfire. But Colt didn't care. He went straight to the mission house, run by a widow named Evelyn Hart, a woman known for her kindness and her sorrow. Evelyn was unlike most women Colt had met. She was strong, graceful, and carried an aura that silenced a room without saying a word. Her husband had been killed years ago, defending settlers from raiders. And since then, she dedicated her life to helping orphans and widows of the frontier. When Colt walked through her door carrying that trembling child, Evelyn's breath caught. She rushed forward, her soft brown eyes widening. "Oh my God, where did you find her?" "In the canyon, half dead," Colt replied. "Looks like she's been lost for days." Evelyn knelt beside the girl, speaking gently in broken Apache, words Colt couldn't understand. The little one blinked, then began to cry, a raw, aching sound that tore through the quiet mission hall. Evelyn wrapped her arms around her and whispered, "You're safe now, child." Colt stood there, unsure why his chest felt tight. Something about the sight of that woman holding the little girl stirred something deep inside him, something he thought he'd buried long ago. Evelyn looked up at him. "You saved her life," she said softly. "Just did what anyone would have done," he replied, adjusting his hat. But Evelyn shook her head. "No, most men wouldn't have stopped." Their eyes met, just for a second, but in that silence, something passed between them. A recognition, a flicker of souls who had both seen loss but still dared to care. As the night settled, Evelyn tended to the child, washing her wounds and feeding her warm soup. Colt sat by the fire watching the flames dance. He felt oddly restless, like his spirit had woken from a long sleep. The girl finally drifted off to sleep beside the hearth. Evelyn draped a blanket over her and turned to Colt. "She says her name is Lita. She doesn't remember where her people are. Just that there was fire and men shouting." Colt clenched his jaw. "Raiders," he muttered. "Could be outlaws, could be soldiers. Hard to say these days." Evelyn looked at him, her expression weary but gentle. "The frontier breaks people, Mr. Dawson, but sometimes it also brings lost souls together. He met her gaze, and for the first time in a long while, Colt couldn't look away. Over the next few days, Colt stayed in Red Hollow longer than he planned. He fixed the mission's old fence, repaired the water trough, helped Evelyn with supplies, anything to keep busy. But deep down, he knew it wasn't about work. It was about her, and maybe in some quiet way about the child too. Little Lita followed him everywhere. She'd watch as he worked, mimicking his movements, giggling when he pretended to fumble tools. She didn't speak his language, but she understood his gentleness. It reminded her of something she'd lost, and something she might be finding again. Evelyn saw the way Colt looked at the girl and at her, and though she tried to keep her heart guarded, every time his deep, calm voice filled the courtyard, something warm stirred inside her chest. One evening, as the sun melted behind the red cliffs, Evelyn stood on the porch, arms folded, watching Colt teaching Lita to feed the horse. "She's smiling again," she said quietly. Colt looked up. "Guess that means we're doing something right." "You have a good heart, Mr. Dawson." He chuckled softly. "That's not what most folks say." "Then most folks don't see what I see," Evelyn replied, her voice barely above a whisper. The moment hung between them, tender, uncertain, yet full of meaning, neither dared to name. But as night came, so did the shadows. A rider arrived at the edge of town, a man carrying a badge and a warning. He brought news that made Colt's blood run cold. A band of raiders had been spotted near the Apache border, and word was they were hunting for a child who'd escaped. Evelyn's eyes widened as she looked toward the sleeping Lita. "They're coming for her," she whispered. Colt's jaw tightened. "Not while I'm breathing." That night, as the wind howled outside and the desert stars burned like silent witnesses, Colt Dawson sat by the window, his revolver resting on the table, eyes fixed on the horizon. He didn't know why he cared so much. Maybe because that little girl had reminded him of something pure. Maybe because the widow's voice had awakened something dead inside him. Or maybe because he'd been running from life for too long, and this time fate had finally made him stop. Whatever it was, Colt Dawson, the man who thought he'd never belong anywhere, had found himself standing between darkness and the two souls, who had somehow begun to mean everything. And as the first hint of dawn touched the desert sky, he whispered to himself, "Over my dead body they'll take her." Little did he know that the child he'd risk his life to protect belonged to the very woman who would soon haunt his dreams forever.